Here I am.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Good.
Uh,
Done. Wow. Look at that.
okay. You had a nice day?
Sure.
Good. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining me to talk about the Avengers. It is very kind of you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I hear you well.
Perfect. Lovely. I can hear you good as well. That's fine. Um, okay. Uh, okay. If you're ready to make a start, we'll begin if that's okay.
Ready when you are.
Okay, wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play the video. I've got my TV in front of me, so I'm just going to play the film for me just to sort of guide the conversation a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure. Hold on.
Um,
Let
if
me,
anybody watching this on YouTube, if they want to sort of watch it, the film along, that of course that might make sense as to what I might be talking about. Um, so I'm just pausing it on the Warner Bros. Logo. So I'll just press play in three, two, one, and zero. The first thing I wanted to ask you was, how did the Avengers come into your life in the first place?
it was a script, an early script that Jerry Weintraub, who was the producer, had sent to me, knowing I guess, my proclivity for, odd, odd and interesting ways of approaching genre or cross collateralizing, pollinating genres so they become a little bit less on the money. So I read it. I was a big Avengers fan growing up.
Mhm.
I grew up in Canada, so we had obviously a lot of BBC and English shows, Prisoner, etc. So I was very familiar with it, and so I agreed to do it, and that was pretty well it. There were some mentions of I think Fincher was involved, maybe as someone they were considering, but they didn't like his approach. Blah blah blah. Whatever it is. Um, I landed it, then went to London with Don McPherson, and we spent several months kind of developing it for screen.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty happy process. We involved Diana Rigg, and then we would let her read it, and you know what I mean. So it was a very good developmental process at the time. Warner Brothers was run by the administration there were very friendly to me, and our executives there were really behind the film, though that was to change over the course of making the film.
Mm. And I just wonder what you thought of the opening credits, the titles. Was that something you're quite happy with, because it's almost a slight sort of Bond-esque in some
Yeah, I was
places.
very happy with them. I worked with the with the artists there and the company on developing that particular thing. I wanted to set up the notion that it had a very Bondian kind of feel to it, but it
Mm.
would be the tropes would be reversing.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, not the original opening of the film. We'll come to some of the changes later, but the opening of the film, of course, is very much based upon an episode of the New Avengers, Target, with the training. Was still going for what turned out to be the training ground. Would you have watched specific episodes in the run up to you know?
No, I wasn't trying to copy it. I just kind of did the gestalt of, during prep, which took about a year just to really acclimatize myself back into the world of that English surreality. Watched many, I watched a lot, but there was no particular episode that I said, "Oh, I'm going to copy that." I mean, it came out of, I mean, possibly Don did when he wrote the script, that he was kind of referencing those things, but I was referring to the script. Of course, the movie's opening, How Now Brown Cow, etc., with phone booth and whatnot, this has been cut to ribbons. I mean, it was a much bigger and more elaborate staging of the scene on the old airbase, phone booth, descent, lab. So it had that thing. I was very, very happy with the way that turned out.
Because of course, I think because there was some reshoots, wasn't there, at some point towards the end? Is that correct or not?
I don't really, you know what I mean? I don't recall there being crazy. Sorry, this is me being silly. I'm just trying to. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hold on, put a marker in. I just want to get my exposure there. There we go. And I want to try and lock it so it doesn't. There we go. Anyway, you know, the whole idea of descending into the world of the Avengers was something that I embraced wholeheartedly and really wanted the purity of that to come out in the film. You know, the difference between the development of the film, the shooting of the film, the editing of the film, the screening of the film, and the political battles that took place around that later really ended up with the film that exists, you know, in public today. Not really the cut that I adhere to, nor this, you know, nor the kind of tone of it score-wise. You know, I stand behind the visuals. Obviously, I stand behind the performances. We had a very, you know, we had a fun time shooting it, I'll tell you that. But you know, again, it was one of those things, got caught in the crossfire, and it was not a happy post.
Yes, yes. You mentioned you have a great cast in this film. One of the people we see during the sort of testing center sequence, Nicholas Woodson as the Dr. Darling character,
Yes.
well known for people recently for his appearance in Skyfall with Daniel Craig. Do you remember working with Nicholas at all?
Yeah, I remember working with everybody on the film. I mean, just it was, again, we tried to, you know, guess Susie Figgis did the casting there, and we basically were focused on the absolute best actors we could get. Of course, who wouldn't want to be in an Avengers film then? So it wasn't that we had to convince a lot of people to do it. People wanted to do it, and I was very, very happy that they did.
Yeah, I think one thing I think is really a real strength of the film is the costume design. I mean, when we first see Uma Thurman, she's in this lovely sort of almost sort of Oriental inspired sort of red costume, and some things, of course, are developed from the TV series. But I think costume design wise, it's done very, very well.
Yeah, production design, Stuart Craig. You know, when the next series he went on to was Harry Potter. So Stuart, you know, one of the best. And so again, it was a very, very happy. We were all really in the spirit of it. We had a great producer in Jerry, and we were far away from the studio in London. So we were away for years while all of the turmoil was happening here. So we did have a very, very good, a good process, but history did catch up with us.
Yeah. You mentioned shooting in London. There's some lovely London locations. Again, the Gentleman's Club, where Emma first encounters Steed, again used in
Boodles.
Using a couple of films. Dying of the Day, the Bond film, quite prominently. Did you get a lot of? Did the Avengers carry a bit of a cachet when it came to getting locations? Was it quite an easy shoot?
Yeah, certainly. You know, yeah, it was fun. I mean, it reminded me now. You know, in retrospect, I directed several episodes of a show called Gossip Girl here, and the Gossip Girl was like New York was a character in the series, and London is a character in the Avengers, very much so. And so we didn't have much pushback on location choices and that club, which really is, sort of exemplary and a perfect, snapshot, iconic of what a classic gentleman's club would be. Of course, we were all members of the Groucho and Blacks and Soho House and all that stuff then. So it was like, oh yeah, that's the old man's club, and we're all hip, and we could have a lot of fun, kind of painting those things in that traditional way.
And of course, Steve, just like in the original series, has a very nice vintage car. Any issues with the car? Was it quite sort of good technically to
Oh yeah, sure. Well, we had a team keep it running.
yeah. Sometimes you hear of issues with these sort of
Oh
look
sure,
great,
sure.
but practicality
Yeah, yeah.
wise.
No, we had a good experience. It's always one of those things of like, oh, go on, please start. No, but it's Jaguar. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. I was just wondering about the casting process because very iconic roles, of course, Mrs. Peel and John Steed. How I believe people like Nicole Kidman were in the mix at one point. How difficult was it to kind of get to your the final leads?
Well, oddly, it wasn't that hard. The original cast, and I say this, with love to Uma. Originally, like Rafe and I were friends, so and he has a proclivity for dark, complex, really, you know, woe is me characters, but is a lovely and fun guy to hang with too. We had toyed over the years of doing something together, in a darker mode. But when this was offered to me, I basically told the studio I wanted Rafe to do it, and he was like, Rafe, fine. So I just phoned him up. I said, Rafe, Steed, how you? I'm in, right? That was it. So that was it. And I also knew Nicole. I'd known her a long, long time. We had actually made, believe it or not, commercials in Australia when she was, 19, 20 years old. So known her a long time. And it was the same thing, just, basically, hey, Nikki, up, how about, Mrs. Peel, Rafe, I'm in. And that was it. What happened was the dates started to conflict with Kubrick's dates, Eyes Wide Shut. And Stanley would not, never did give an end date of when he would be finished with his movie. You know what I mean? It was like open ended. And so we kept pushing and pushing. And I was happy to, push the start date, but Warner's really wanted the movie, really needed the movie. At least that's what they said. And so we had to let go of the Nicole thing and go with who's going to be available. And the studio were very, very high on Uma. I loved her, and we thought, yeah, let's go with it. And there you go. So that came together. And with Sean, it was a little bit different because the studios basically said, well, you got a green light. We were happy with the cast. Go and make it. Just find a great villain. I said, oh, I want Connery to play the villain. It would be so fun. They went, we're never going to do. We'll never make a deal. We're never going to pay him. He's always so expensive. I said, listen, you can always say no, but let me send him the script. So I did. A couple of weeks later, it was that phone call at home. Sean here. Is this Jeremiah? Wow, that voice, hearing it live for the first time. And he said, I read your script. It's quite interesting. Would you care to come and, spend a weekend with me in Marbella? And so flew to Spain, and we spent the weekend, and we got on just very famously well, as we did for the whole show, which was unusual for director and Sean. I remember walking up his driveway, and I said, Sean, if you're going to do the movie, just tell me now. If you're not going to do it, just tell me, because on Monday I'm going to have to make an offer to another actor, and I'm got to prepare the offer to Michael Caine right away. So he looked at me, and it was like, I'm in. And that was how Sean came onto it. And, again, Michael Caine announced his retirement today. So, so good on him. But at some point over the production, Caine, Sean, and I went out to dinner. It was a lot of fun because they were old mates, and that was like super fun, and competitive. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I was wondering about the training that Uma and Ray had to go through, because there's got quite a nice elaborate
Yeah,
fencing
we had
sequence.
obviously we had great trainers and swordsmen, etc., in London, and they did spend many an hour working that out and rehearsing and all the rest of it. Yeah, hey, for safety and style too.
There would have been a little bit of in pre-production, a bit of sort of physical training for both of
Oh
the
yeah, a lot of
principals.
it. Yeah, because the sets were complex to build, and it was a long ramp up. The film was envisioned very different how it turned out. It was a very kind of light touch on the performances and the direction, and it was a much more elliptical plotting where the absurdity of it was kind of explained as we went along. And of course, when the studio kind of hacked it up, you lost all of the kind of quote internal logic of the thing. So it didn't really end up in a way that made sense to me. I can barely watch it now, and despite the light touch of the characterization and tonality, I had focused on a very Michael Kamen originally, a very dark score. So it was a dark brooding score that was like this dark cloud over this kind of frothy, light, English mannered performance. And that dramatic tension was very unique and very interesting. And I was very disappointed. Not that Joel McNeely did a bad score. He did what the studio wanted, but they wanted it, more comedic, more actiony, leading the audience by the nose a little bit. And he's a fantastic composer as well, but it wasn't the tonality that I had originally envisioned in the piece.
Did Michael Kamen use the Avengers theme a bit more, the original theme, or was there kind of sort of?
I think so. I think so. I know that Adam and the Edge did a piece for the opening as well. So yeah, I think we integrated some of that into it. It's hard for me to recall because I don't have a copy of the original.
Yeah, and was Michael Kamen's score actually recorded?
No, it was all kind of mocked up. It was orchestrated, but no, we never got a chance.
So what was the kind of reason for them kind of pulling it? Because that's quite far in the process to suddenly say, well, hang on, no, we're getting rid of it. It wasn't.
Well, we were ready to go to recording, but
Yeah.
didn't want to. Often, when you're working on previews with these kinds of movies, and this was, basically an expensive art movie.
Yeah.
Go figure. And so you temp it, right? So you're using temporary score, and we used a lot of that, all kinds of tricks and to emulate what we would finally be recording. And that is the quote false score that goes out with audiences to rate the movie or understand how it plays with an audience. Of course, the fix was in when we showed the film to an audience. They insist, instead of having screenings in like London, New York, even LA, they wanted to go to Phoenix in front of basically a Latino audience who had no reference, didn't understand anything, and then built in all this, and then they said, well, it doesn't play, it's negative, and so they use that as an excuse, to my great heartbreak.
Yeah, it does seem that it was very much because of, it seemed that people did kind of want it not to work, and it just one test screen to suddenly make all those decisions based, rather than just say having 10 or so. Well, it was an excuse, wasn't it, really?
I mean, one of the problems is there were two executives who had taken over production at the studio at Warner's, where I had a deal there for many years, and I had a very strong relationship with Terry and Bob, who were their bosses. And the two kind of co-heads of production at the studio, one of them was our executive, who really wanted to make the movie, and the other one was another executive who never wanted to make the movie, and they were battling it out. Our executive lost the battle, and the one who didn't want to ever make the movie took over the studio. And of course, politically, it didn't serve him to make this into any kind of success, because that would look badly on him.
Yeah.
And so they threw it under the bus, and there you go.
It's a story that seems to be quite a common one when it comes to Warner Brothers. They did that with Superman 4 10 years before, and now Warner Brothers at the moment, there's a rumor that it might be sold to Universal at some point. So there does seem to be a slight ego rather than the products, and not, it seems to be very weird sort of power games. And
yeah, it's not the first time that happened. It was just, there was bad luck on my end in terms of being caught up. It wasn't a quote commercial project to begin with. The studio had been suffering in terms of their output, so they were desperate for an action movie, which I'd never never really sold this like an action movie. It was more unrequited love, perverse as it was, surrealistic world kind of view. So there was a very, we differed on what kind of movie it was towards the end. Not at the beginning, everyone was all rah, 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 yeah, do it that way. And of course, when it all changed, in order to protect one's power at the studios, you have to do what you got to do. And, when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And unfortunately, we were the grass.
That's a good way of pointing it, of putting it. I think one undeniable thing is how much Sean Connery seems to enjoy the role and his interplay with Uma Thurman in the greenhouse sequence. It's very playful. So
Yeah.
it must have been quite a delight to work with.
Yes, it does. Like I'm not going to say that, when you look at the scene, it was when I called cut, everybody turned away and walked to their things grim. No, those scenes are very much the mood on set. And even the big fight scenes between Rafe and Sean's swords and floods, I mean, they were soaked to the skin, and it was really kind of, we were all like, yeah, this is great. So again, there was a lot of joy. I hope you can kind of find it in the cracks of, between the lines, read the vibe of it. But yes, we were all of a piece. Broadbent, Eileen Atkins, who were just my absolute go-tos. Jim Broadbent, one of the great actors of our generation.
So. Oh yeah. I've seen Jim Broadbent on stage a few times, and yes,
dazzling.
He's a delight.
He's a dazzling actor. He's dazzling. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice to his fans as well, and so it's I think a perfect person to play the mother character. People may debate on other people, but I think Jim Broadbent was very nicely cast in
yeah, I mean, for director, and it really took me, the whole experience of making the movie really, took me apart for a few years, because I really believed in it. I believed in the cut that I made. I believed in the score, the tone, the whole, project, which I was very happy to defend. Not going to argue that it would have been wildly successful or not, but at least I could defend the fact that I had made the movie. This was the movie. It was an expression of my, I guess, my imagination of how I interpreted it, my cultural references, and all the rest of it. But I was not able to bring that to the public sphere, but I had to wear it as a director. It was very difficult.
Oh yeah. I want to talk about shooting at Pinewood briefly, because this lovely scene with Uma and Rafe in the snow, and I think it's very, very nicely done. What was it like working in the Pinewood grounds? Of course, this is the gardens of the main house.
I love working. I love working at Pinewood for a lot of reasons. It's a very, for lack of a better term, cozy studio. It's intimate in that way. And so the feeling is not sort of, you're in an industrial arena trying to recreate. There are gardens and they're all pathways and you can apply them, and yet you have all the infrastructure there. And there was only, I believe, only Stanley was shooting Eyes Wide Shut there, coincidentally,
Yeah.
at the same time. Although for a while there was a Star Wars rolled in for a while we were doing it. So got a chance to hang out with George and with Stanley, which was phenomenal.
What
Great.
did you make of Stanley and George?
Well, George was just, I didn't know him at all, but he, I knew Liam and he invited me over and during, between breaks or when I had done whatever it was. But George, and I'll get him a seat next to me and watch on the monitors. It was very exciting, obviously to meet someone like that. And Stanley is Stanley. I mean, he had been kind to me in print when I was making commercials and had kind of identified me in a way that I think put me on the map in terms of Hollywood, and started a, my kind of invitation in through the crack in the door that was opened. And then, there's very few people who are allowed on his set, but we were both shooting nights, and I knew Brian Cook, who was his AD. Of course, I knew Nicole, and I had met Tom through Nicole. So yeah, it was kind of fun. It was great. It was visiting them on their New York night scenes.
Yeah. There's this very nice little role that Kaylee Hawes has as the
Really?
and of course gone on to huge
Yes,
success.
yes. And every time I see her, and boy, you see her a lot, my heart leaps with joy. You know what I mean? I didn't know. She just came in. She auditioned. This was an early part for her. And there was never any doubt. I mean, as soon as she walked out of the audition, maybe as soon as she walked into the audition, I went, there she is. She's great. And she was great in that scene. Just great, holding her own with him. I mean, you just knew that if she had, put her head down, kept working, that she would achieve, I guess, stardom or whatever, but she'll work, forever. She's a wonder of an actress, and loved working with her as briefly as I did.
I think another really great scene is, and you can tell how much Sean Connery is having fun with it, is the teddy bears around the table. And that must
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Again, how can you not love a scene with Eddie Izzard, Sean Connery in big bear costumes? Again, unfortunately, they took out a lot of the bear stuff, which, by the way, I think if I had to identify something in McPherson's script that made me so want to do the movie, it was those scenes.
Yeah.
And so again, the stripping out of those scenes or parts of those scenes to shorten the movie arbitrarily really ticked me off, because I loved every minute of those teddy bear scenes. How you can have a boardroom with people, and they were all in disguise, right?
Yeah.
But it's just absurdity after absurdity. So yes, bring me joy.
I was at an event for the 50th anniversary of the Avengers, and Brian Clemens, the producer of the show, did talk about the film briefly. And one of the things I think that confused him was the teddy bears sequence. But I think because you lose all the context, and once I talked to Don about it, it made perfect sense as to why. So
yes, I mean, Don's script was fantastic. I mean, I loved it. We both, I got most of the blame. He may have gotten some, but it wasn't our original piece. I mean, there was a lot left out of it, and a lot of tonality, as I previously mentioned, was shifted and changed. So the film never got a chance to stand up on its own feet.
No. And it did have a long production history way before you and Don got on the film.
I think it bounced around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think it was suddenly all the pieces came together when you two were aboard? Was there certain?
I think it's all attributed to Jerry Weintraub. who was one of the last of the, the old classical Hollywood producers. You know what I mean? Who was a force, not a guy who would go to the studio with a little begging bowl. Can I have some also? No, this is a raging bull in a china shop. And when he wanted to make a movie, he did. And he had figured it out, and he had identified who he wanted. And, we were lucky enough at the time to get the gig.
And there never was a talk of doing it in the States. You're always going to film in it. Was it because of the exchange rate and things of that nature?
No. How can you make the Avengers not in London?
You had to
it's just not. You just can't even conceive of it.
Yeah,
you wouldn't even hear of it, right?
Because what's interesting, of course, that they did make the last few of the new Avengers in Canada, of course.
In Toronto, yes, they did.
So sometimes that kind of happens.
But as we say, certainly not as good as the original.
Yes. I mean, I to be honest, love all versions of the Avengers. I suppose there was never any doubt of having it with Steed and Mrs. Peel, because of course there's so different versions of the Avengers. It's difficult to kind of think necessarily what you put on a 2-hour film, really.
Yeah, it's different animal, sure.
And I take it was the Mrs. Peel series that you found love with as an audience member.
Yeah, the Diana Rigg version is, maybe it's just because of my age then, coming of age. She was so beautiful, so hot. And, you're a 14, 15-year-old, and it's like, oh my God. And so it made a big impact. Right?
Yes. And we're seeing Eddie Izzard on the screen at the moment. Was he, I suppose, quite a joker on set? Eddie, was he?
Who?
Eddie Izzard, was he quite?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Funny story around Eddie, because I wasn't aware of Eddie Izzard when we began. He was locally, certainly in London, a very popular comic locally. He hadn't broken out yet. I remember we were at the Dorchester Hotel, Don and I, kind of working on some scenes, whatnot. The TV was on, MTV, sound off. And I looked over, and there's a character of Connery's assistant who had one word in the entire movie. Shit, that was the only word. And so I just wanted an interesting face. That's all I really wanted. I looked over at the TV, and Eddie was evidently being interviewed. The sound was off, and he just had that great face that you can see in all kinds of paintings over the years. Just an amazing, great expression. And I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Oh, that's Eddie Izzard. He's a comic." So I picked up the phone. I phoned Susie Figgis, who's our casting director. And I said, "Could you get Eddie Izzard for a meeting to do the part of the assistant?" And she was like, "Oh, that's brilliant. You're brilliant. What a genius idea." I didn't know what I was talking about. Eddie comes in, and we just hit it off from the get-go. I mean, first of all, the irony is hiring Eddie to play a character who doesn't talk, which Eddie talks a lot in multiple linguistic variations of language, whatever that is. And over the course of the show, again, bringing great humor and fun and energy to the piece. And I remember when we wrapped, he said, "Oh, you should. I'm doing a show at the Hammersmith. Why don't you come? Because you've never seen me perform." And I had never seen him perform. I didn't know anything about his comedy. I heard he played in pubs and things like that to start and whatnot. So I remember we were taking a cab to the Hammersmith, and I thought, oh, they must have a little adjunct to the big stage at the Hammersmith that is like for up and coming acts. And then as we approach it, you're approaching it and you see the parking lot and the big sign. It said, "Eddie Izzard, 10 nights, sold out."
Yeah.
And you walk in and like it's a big place, right? And he held it in the palm of his hand. Of course, afterwards we went out, and I was like dumbfounded. Of course, when he came here to do his HBO show, we reconnected, and that really the HBO show here in LA really set him off, and he's been just ever much a genius, great actor, wonderful human, very compassionate. I haven't seen him in a while, but I look forward to when the wheel comes around again. He's one of my favorite people.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was wondering, there's quite a bit of elaborate fight sequence on the top of the building in the city of London, or the gantries, or the pipe work, etc. Was that complex to shoot?
Logistically, yes, safety wise, of course. But no more, I think the hardest, most difficult scenes to shoot are two people facing each other with no dialogue. That's challenging. That's where you have to dig deep.
Yeah.
Big production stuff, you prepare for it, your team is good, you've rehearsed it, everyone knows what they have to bring to it, and so it's more execution.
Yeah,
I think that's true of most directors that I know.
Of course, we have some lovely scenes between Rafe and Uma, and one of the criticisms that I personally don't get of the film was their chemistry. People didn't seem to like it, but I suppose it's because it is quite a quirky in their character. I suppose it wasn't an obvious traditional romantic, and maybe anything that's not obvious people don't always necessarily get.
It's hard for me to respond to that, because it is what it is. Having spent time again with Rafe and Nicole Kidman before, like together, because when we were talking about doing it, and there's they had great chemistry, like just at the get-go. Uma came in, I think she had to do what she had to do. She wasn't naturally English, British, Australian, but there was not that. And there is, I think it's a valid criticism, because, chemistry is an ineffable kind of quality. You kind of have it or you don't, it's like you can't teach it. So I think there is that. I don't think it was helped by all of the adverse post-production issues. So I think if the film was allowed to breathe, in other words, another half hour of the stuff that's taken out, then the nuances start to come out rather than be subverted. And that would give rise to a much more, call it complex in the context of that film, relationship that I think would be a lot less apt to be criticized. So while I can see the criticism, it is because it seems to be painted in a very broad brush, but it was directed with a much finer brush. So again, I'm not laying blame on anybody but myself. I wasn't able to convince the studio that a multi-million-dollar art film of questionable kind of aesthetics and tonality was something that was going to set the studio on fire, but it certainly didn't end up the way I wanted it.
Another cast member I wanted to mention, Fiona Shaw, is the father character. Of course, that is
another one of my favorite women. I just love working with her. I mean, like, it was like, oh, I'd love to work with her, and I'd love to work with him, and you know what I mean? So all of that, from Trubshaw to Father and Mother and all the rest of it, again, it was like just a huge amount of Stradivari at my disposal. And, for those who are interested, who worked with me, I apologize, didn't work out that way. I tried, as you know.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of luck, isn't there, to any kind of talent and production, and if it doesn't quite, the winds aren't in your favor, it can
yeah. Well, it was the only movie that had been really seriously fiddled um,
Hmm.
of mine
Yeah.
with the studio. I'd made many, and for better or worse, they were not interfered with.
Hmm. So one quite good scene is the insects attacking the Steed and Emma in the car. A combination of CGI and practical was
Yeah,
that might have been quite involving sequence, that one.
yeah, it was kind of fun. It was that was something that um, initially it was a very short little scene. In other words, it was not something that even in the first draft, I don't think we had it. It was something that Warner Brothers wanted,
Mhm.
and they wanted it bigger and bigger and bigger, but they didn't give us time or money to do it right. But it ended up okay. It was kind of fun to do. It was fun to imagine. It was fun to shoot. You know, bees attacking a XK Jag is kind of fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, but it wasn't. It was all storyboarded and worked out shot by shot.
Hmm.
So
And you
on
probably
that
had more
level,
than and you had more than one car, I take it. Sort of, you'd had stunt versions and
all of that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Was it shot in Black Park by any chance?
I think
Some of
so.
it.
Yeah, as I
Yeah,
recall. Yeah.
yeah. Because any sort of foresty sequence when a film shot at Pinewood tends to be at least some of it in Black Park.
Yeah.
Blenheim Palace is featured quite heavily in the
Yeah.
film. What was
Yeah.
it like to shoot at Blenheim?
Well, for someone from LA, it's kind of like, yeah, cool digs. What's it
Mm,
cost to heat this place?
yeah.
Um, no, I mean, Blenheim is, again, certainly after Downton Abbey, we are used to these majestic, old school British massive uh, estates, which are now in trouble, right? Because the kids don't want them.
No.
Um, but again, the grounds, the rooms, it needed so little in terms of production, and it's kind of a visualist dream, especially on the American side. I think the British who are more used to that would consider it. Oh yeah, Blenheim. It's another one of those. But our eyes from here, it's like, wow, that's big and beautiful. And it was certainly one of the best of the bunch that I'd
Mm.
seen. I mean, just like Boodles, like it was iconic in its kind of visual representation of what it should be.
Mm. Mm. I think Eileen Atkins' character of Alice is brilliantly executed. It's the way she takes the machine gun out of her little bicycle basket, the flowers, and sort of sort of the juxtaposition between her exterior and, of course, that she's a very competent agent. Do you remember working with Eileen Atkins?
Yeah, I mean, Eileen is someone who every director should try and work with Eileen Atkins on anything because, again,
Mm.
like Broadbent, she is a Stradivarius, and her ability to work in broad, subtle, humorous, dramatic, make these beautiful turns, understand the characters. And I dare say we became good friends after that
Mm.
movie.
Mm. And there's a nice blending of locations, which I'm guessing are the grounds of Blenheim and the Pinewood Gardens. I take it that those are the two
Yeah.
kind of locations you used. Am I correct in saying that Alice was the role that Daniel Rigg was kind of potentially going to do? That was the
No,
role
I don't
that,
recall that. I mean, I
yeah,
just don't recall.
yeah. Well, I think Don said that that was the role that they kind of
Good.
sort of pitched to her because I obviously from an age point of
Oh,
view would have
yeah,
fitted.
yeah. No, no,
Yeah,
no. He probably
yeah,
has more of a memory of that particular
yeah.
thing than I do, but it's very possible.
Did you ever have a desire to bring in people like Honor Blackman and other people from the Avengers, or
No, because I thought it would be too cute at the end of the day,
yeah, yeah.
and distracting from our characters. Unfair. I mean, I think we did it enough. I mean, we did consider Diana, Dame Diana, to
Mm,
do to do a part. We just couldn't figure out what and where. She was game, obviously. I remember Don and I went out to dinner with her, or Rafe and I went to dinner with her, which was lovely. And, just to discuss the tonality of the script. We definitely wanted to hit it right in terms of the script that would be, quote, familiar to her in terms of what all the scripts that she had read. And we certainly wouldn't want to go forward until that was, I want to say, not approved, but blessed by Diana Rigg.
So it's kind of something that
Same
she
thing with
wasn't.
Patrick. Same thing with
Yeah.
Patrick. Only got to use Patrick
Yeah.
and his voices, and that was fun having him on set.
Oh yeah, I'll certainly mention Patrick in a little bit, but so Diana was kind of quite open to it, and it's just perhaps just not quite find something that she was happy
Yeah, I
with.
didn't, or
Didn't quite
I
work out.
don't think we ever offered. There wasn't anything that I felt was kind of right. I think at the time, and maybe Don has a different recollection, but I can't remember. We both would have had her in there for sure.
I was wondering about the maze in Blenheim Palace, and whether that was good to shoot in, and whether anybody got lost in it or anything like that.
Only me. No, and we have obviously we built on it and whatnot. Shooting in a maze is it's fun, it's challenging, it's great. And maybe a lot easier now with CG, AI, and all of that stuff, drones. But no, it's just it's kind of a perfect metaphor for the Avengers aesthetic, which is a complete maze.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was again a bit lost in the reduced running time was the relationship between Connery and Uma Thurman, in terms of there's a lot of his motivation for creating a clone of Emma Peel is lost, and his obsession with her is.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the small things and the delicate things that when you start to cut for time or just reduce to make it something else, you lose. For me, if we're making music, is you can't cut the silences from a piece. The silences are what define the notes, and I think that a lot got lost in the translation when the expedited version came to the surface. That's really overall my big beef.
Yeah. I'm just seeing the lovely scene where they're dancing in the Blenheim Palace, when obviously he's dragged her, and a little bit like moments like that I think are really good. Was some of it a bit cut because they wanted that PG-13 rating a little bit, just to sort of cut out some of the
No, I don't know. You know what? I don't think we ever pushed it past the PG-13 anyway. I think just naturally it didn't have anything that would be, overly weird, racy, overly sexual, because there's a tameness to that British sexuality that is very polite and very formal, and et cetera, et cetera. So we stayed true to that.
Yeah. And one thing you do get in the film is little text coming up to explain, for example, this is John Steve, this is Emma Peel. Was that something, a product of the shorter version, just to kind of make it a bit clearer?
I think that was really for the American audiences who may not have really been aware that these are characters that were in the cultural vernacular. So we did that.
Yeah. I was just wondering just a bit more about yourself. Why you got into directing in the first place? What sort of inspired you to become a director?
I guess I just couldn't do anything else. One's life as an artist takes many turns, and you follow your opportunities. I began as a painter and printmaker, and then photographer, and then commercial director, and then one thing led to another. It's just, these are small stepping stones that you take, and paths diverge. You take one way, take another way. Perhaps if I didn't take the Avengers, I would have had a different career. But my career now is pretty it's pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got over the one thing that it did teach me is not to fear failure,
Hmm.
and then emboldened me in many ways. So having had a massive failure of something that you are so invested in emotionally is really brings you to a critical point, a crossroads in your creative life, going, maybe this isn't for me. But because of that, I was able to, in a way, come out of it as a television director, now executive producer, and be active and make really fun shows. And so in a way, good came out of it, as painful as it was to experience it. But again, the process was not painful. It was just the fiscal, mechanical, I guess, political agendas that I got caught in was not, it just was wrong time, wrong place.
Mm.
But so why, I direct, I make art. That's what I do. It's just my life.
Do you have were your parents in the arts, or was it kind of just something that isn't unique to you?
No, it was just little old me.
Mm.
Um, it was like science or art, and I guess I chose art over science, though I'm very into, in my personal work as
Mm.
a visualist.
Mm.
Uh, Science references are very much invested in how I manage aesthetics. But no, I consider myself very lucky to be able to direct and to continue to direct, and look forward to doing it more and more. You know,
Mm.
it's very, the world has moved on. It's very different too now in terms of what gets made, what gets released, IP, all the rest of that. That's all very and it's continuing to change, especially after or during the strike. Now
Mm.
we're going to come out of this when the actor strike finally ends, with a whole different view of what gets greenlit, what gets shown, international, local, domestic.
Mm.
Who knows?
And well, we're talking about chemistry, and I think there's a really good scene with when Steve puts on Emma's new boots. And I think that's a really good.
Oh yeah, I
There's some really good.
remember shooting that scene.
Yeah, it's like quite a
That's an
fun.
example of a scene. I don't think that was cut too much, as I recall. I haven't seen the movie in a while. Um, but that's an indication of a scene that shows the promise of very good chemistry.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
an intimacy in that in that allows it to breathe and nuance, and
Mm.
there's a fetishism in there. I mean, it's
Well,
just
yeah.
very kind of nuanced in that way, and I would I would say that most of the scenes between the two of them had that kind of underscore, underpinning foundation.
Mm. So in terms of costume design, were the actors quite involved in what they thought they should wear, or was that kind of sort of how's
No, we
that
bring them in
relationship?
on everything. It's very important to me as a director that the actors are absolutely 100% not accepting, but loving what they wear, because once they
Mm.
put it on, they inhabit the character.
Mm. And of
So yeah,
course,
costume design was.
mm.
I remember being at the fitting for Connery with the teddy bear outfit and
Yeah.
did photos. That was just, I forget where it was.
Mm.
Somewhere maybe in North Soho or something. But just to see Sean in that suit with the
Mm.
head off, it was just so fun. He was a great sport. He loved it too.
There's not much behind the scenes footage from the film that I could find, but one thing I did find was a little brief interview with Connery, and he was talking about how much he loved the teddy bear thing, and he seemed like he had a whale of time with the different outfits, and of course
He
didn't get
did. He
killed.
did. Yeah. I mean, I can say that, I survived a shoot. a shoot with Sean Connery, and None the Worse for Wear. I really enjoyed working with him a
Mm.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
As difficult as he was purported to be,
Mm.
once he came, and he was so prepared, came to the set, knew his call time would arrive, no entourage, knew his words, went into makeup, ready to work at the allocated time. But if we were behind
Mm.
and he had to wait, you would call for the AD, Terry, and Terry would come in, and you just see his trailer like shaking, right? I was like, I'm staying out of it, right?
Mm.
But no, really
Mm.
great.
Yeah, it sounds like as long as people treated him well and would they were professional and they were not.
If you knew what you were doing and you
Yeah.
you weren't kind of just sucking up to him, because I pushed back on him a lot, and I didn't agree with everything he wanted to do, and I pushed back, and I had my reasons, and I explained them, and I was very focused on that, and
Mm.
he was there. And when you were shooting with him as an actor, he was very much like any actor I found. I mean, where you'd give him a note, he would do it. And he'd go, "Oh, let me think about it. Oh, okay, let's go. Let's go." And off you go. And when it was done, he'd look at you and he was going, "Was that okay? Is that what you're looking for?" I mean, just like any other actor. So you just forgot about the iconic Sean Connery, James Bond, you
Mm.
know, and you just work with the actor who was there acting for many, many years, and exploring his joy of acting, because
Mm.
he'd been doing it a long time.
Mm. I suppose it's also something that Ray Fiennes would have to sort of deal with, was that such an iconic character of John Steed. It would be very easy, a bit like Roger Moore's always worried that saying James Bond would come out for Scottish accent. So it must have been maybe not so much for humor, because he might not have been so aware of the TV series. But was there? Did they kind of find it a bit, particularly Rafe, a little bit of, or how do I kind of, such an iconic role?
Well, I can only describe it as in one moment that may give you what we both felt. We were in the tower set with the water pouring and sword fighting and all of that
Mm.
stuff. And I remember calling cut. We were going to do it again. And I turned to Rafe, and Rafe looked at me. This is like take one. And Rafe mouths to me, "Can you believe we're doing this with him?"
Yeah.
Both of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We were so excited, like we're beating Sean Connery up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really defines the excitement, joy, and the kind of, sometimes you just have to take a step back and go, wow, working
Mm.
with an iconic actor like that is good, because his baggage brings a lot to that particular role, doesn't take away from it.
Mm.
And Sean, I mean, you look at his work in the Molly Maguires, it's just amazing. Um, but I would always go, yes, Sean Connery of Darby O'Gill and the Little People. I would
Mm.
always like, oh, now that was a role, Sean. That was a role.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
needling him, taking the piss. So
Well, you said about having Patrick McNee on board. So I mean, he must have liked the script and what you guys were doing for
oh
him
yeah,
to want to be
and
involved.
just a great guy to boot, right? Just heaven.
Mm. And was it always going to be? Did he always want a role in it, or was that something that took a bit of persuading?
No, it didn't take much to persuade. We just wanted to find the right role. We had a role of the Invisible Man. It was like, I remember Don and I was like, let's offer it to Patrick. His voice is so
Mm.
memorable that
Yeah.
you couldn't do better than that. And that
Mm.
would be, that's the kind of callback to the original that we thought was appropriate.
Yeah. Because if you had, say, him appear, you could see him. It may have been a bit
Well, then it's
distracting
two
having.
steeds, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I always wondered, when you actually see his silhouette on the projector and the map, was
Yeah.
that Patrick? Because it looks a bit like him, but not quite. Just wonder whether he did that bit or not. Or it might have been a
I don't
double.
recall. I don't recall that. I
Yeah.
really don't recall doing it. That could
Hmm.
have been a second unit shot because it didn't require the principal actors.
Yeah, because I've
And
got a feeling it's somebody that looks a bit like him, but not. But when you sort of look, I think you first watch it, or you think it's Patrick, but I think you watch it again, it might
yeah,
not quite be him.
I'm blanking on that.
Hmm. The scene where Connery is in a full Scottish regalia, saying
Oh yes,
I'm taking over the world,
in
sort of
Greenwich,
the
the
wonderful
scene in
villain
Greenwich.
speech.
Yeah, the yeah.
This must have been really fun for him to
It
do.
was fun for him. It was one of the most fun sequences in the movie for me to shoot. You
Hmm.
know, the location is like, whoa. And he just like commands the space. There's very few actors who can like just
Hmm.
own that. You know what I mean? And in a kilt.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You know, this is Connery at his most Connery-esque.
Hmm. Would you
But
do a
it's
lot
just
of
the beginning.
yeah? What did Connery like to do a lot of takes? Was he one of those people like to do one and done, or was he kind of
No, no, not one and done. He would do, you know, he'd do whatever you want. I mean, you know what I mean? But he would give you, you know, I think I would, you know, for me, maybe 7 takes would be a lot. You know,
hmm,
3 would be fine. These, you know, the actors really, once they were dialed in, they knew what they were doing.
hmm,
We did lots of different approaches, as one does, you know, when
hmm,
you have the time and money, in terms of angles and whatnot. But no, I there was nothing. I never had to accommodate uh, my style of shooting to him.
hmm. Yeah. There's lots of snow effects in the film. Of course, visually very exciting, but a bit of is it a lot of setup and quite difficult to kind of work with those kind of practical effects?
Yeah, I mean, it requires a lot of people, requires, you know, footprints, obviously, fill in, whatnot. We also, you know, worked with massive models of London where we were able to snow them.
Hmm.
And so that was also fun working with miniatures in that way. Um, and I mean, it's funny, if I look at the movie with the sound off, I can almost tolerate it now, despite all the cuts. Um, but yeah, and then the snow just had a purity to it. It really, you know, it basically nothing says weather than
Hmm.
snow,
Yeah.
driving snow.
Hmm.
So it just had a different, and also we're not used to London in the snow.
No, no, no.
So
And the hot air balloon sequence of the fight on the top, the two,
yeah,
because again you some bit of split screen, some doubles.
yeah.
Again,
Again,
is that
miniatures. You know, a lot of
hmm,
miniatures there.
yeah,
Yeah.
an awful lot of different sort of filmmaking disciplines going on in
Yeah,
this sequence.
some of them very, very old shift-end processes that have been used for a long time. Some modern miniatures. This is obviously before AI and a lot of very sophisticated CG that we use now, models, Maya, all of that stuff that are now kind of just in the kind of common vernacular, but we didn't have those to work with. So we work with more old school techniques, which I love as well, because
Hmm.
they're beautiful and organic and, you know, they're great.
Did you enjoy sort of the scenes on the balloons? You've got the flame coming from the the burn of the balloon, so you've got fire
Yeah.
effects, and she was quite happy to do as much as
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
could.
Very, you know, you know, I like the, and anything that's challenging technically, I like, you know,
Hmm.
I find it interesting. And it also, it helps situate the actors internally.
Yeah.
You know, the more intensity you bring to the framing device of the scene, better.
Hmm. In more sort of recent times, have you done productions where you've got a lot of green screen and things aren't necessarily there, and is it more difficult for you and the actors to kind of do that kind of stuff?
Um, I don't know, I'm so used to it. So are the actors. I mean, the show that I'm doing now, you know, season 2, we've got hundreds of effect shots in the show.
Hmm.
Uh, um, it's just something we do. We try not to, you know, try not to work with a lot of green screen. But if and nowadays, you know, you can get away with a lot, especially if you're using volumetric shooting with Unreal Engine in kind of, you know, screen, which you can then change to a green screen for a shot and then go back to your realism on set. It's just different tools, adapting to using different tools. I like shooting, give me an iPhone and a good story, or a 70 millimeter camera, or, an RE. I'll, I'll work. It's really the story, and the technical stuff like that. While it's fascinating, interests me, it's all really about the characters, who they are, and out of that, the story, and then the technical.
One of the more controversial elements in the film is the kiss between Steed and Peel. How did I think Don was saying that wasn't in his original scripts? That might be in sort of like a Warner Bros. What did you think about it at the time? And perhaps
No, I just thought that no, that was me 100%. I just thought we're waiting for that for the entire movie. The unrequited love, the rubber band pulled back. We would feel robbed, I think, if we didn't have that sense of completion. And so, do it. If it doesn't work, cut it out. I felt it worked.
Again, I've been an Avengers fan. I saw the show when I was growing up, or repeats and DVDs, and so I don't really see what some people have an issue with it. But Brian Clemens, the producer, always said about the Steve Peel relationship that his theory was that before you see him in the TV series, they had this romance, this very, very intense affair, and then
he's 100% right.
Yeah,
it happens post-coital. In other words,
yes, and this is the pre, isn't it? This is perfectly in keeping with mythology.
You know what I mean? And I take his initial reaction to heart, because he's right. In other words, but in a TV series, of which I'm now a so-called expert, in a TV series, you have a lot of time to move that in and out, to bring them together, to stretch them apart, almost kiss to not kiss, and maybe at the very end of the last episode of the show, right, that they kiss, and there's that callback to what might have been, what could have been, where we started, how it was. But in a movie, you've got to get to where you got to be a little bit more efficiently, and so there are story points that maybe get kind of rolled over a bit, or emotional story points. I do think that in television, one of the things that I really love about television is the very fact that we have longer time to deal with those kinds of relationship dynamics, so they're not so linear, and they're more elliptical, and they have a lot more dynamic range. So you're able to do that in a series that I personally have not been able to do. Maybe in Benny and June, I did something there, but romantically, it's a delicate balance.
Oh yeah. I was wondering about the nice scene where they're both in the balloons and they're walking across the water.
Oh, yeah.
That must have been quite tricky to do, perhaps.
Yeah, that was tricky. That was fun. That was great. I'm kicking myself because that is very much borrowed, stolen homage to a wonderful fashion photographer. God, kick myself for not remembering his name. But those are, it's very, very, because he had shot for Vogue models in suspended globes on cranes or on water and all of that. And I really wanted to do that. I was very much into that.
Yeah. I'm not sure, unless it's David Bailey. I mean, I don't really know many
No.
fashion photographers, really, but yeah, I think it's a nice little, and very much I think it's something that's in keeping with the TV series. And I think again, if you have this as kind of like a prequel to the TV series, and it kind of sort of works in their kind of relationship. I was wondering about the cinematography. Of course, Roger Pratt have gone to do huge amounts of work. How much do you sort of work?
The giant.
Yeah. did you spend a lot of time with someone like him to sort of work out the visual tone and exactly kind of how it's going to look?
You know, between Roger, me, Stuart Craig,
Mm.
we were joined at the hip,
Right.
like we were family at the end of this, just like
Mm.
three of us, like every decision had elements of what we all needed to do because,
Yeah.
you know, everything affected everything else.
Mm. Yeah, because of course the production design's got to complement the cinematography and
Yeah.
vice
And in this
versa.
case, you know, when you're shooting at Blenheim, when you're shooting at in Greenwich, the Naval Academy, all of that stuff, there are limitations of what you can put on the wall, what you can't, how you light it, where you can go. You have to be very conscientious of your environment, and yet you
Mm.
really want to be true to your overall design, etc. So a lot of conversations, but fun ones for us. You know, these are the
Mm.
conversations that we enjoy doing.
Mm. And I think there's a lot of great shadow work, particularly with Connery and his sort of in with his consoles and things of that. So it's always sort of, it's not hugely brightly lit. It's all very sort of, because again, this is designed to be more of an art film, and I think that bleeds into the look of how
Yeah,
it's, so I assume that if it was done to its original sort of concept, it would have been maybe a third of what the budget actually was in the end. But,
I don't know. Who
it's,
knows?
it was supposed to be a smaller film, though, wasn't it? I think from a
Um, no,
or no,
no. I think if anything, they would have loved a bigger film. But
Hmm.
the size of the film was the size of the film that we were able to squeeze out of Warner Brothers, and
Hmm.
it was probably enough.
And the climax of the film, I take it this is this the 007 stage at Pinewood?
No, we didn't need the
Didn't use that
007
one.
stage.
No.
We didn't really need it. I think we did that. The big water tanks and all of that we did at Shepperton.
Oh, Shepperton. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of course I think but Pinewood now have quite a fantastic inside sort of water tank. I don't think that would have existed back in the
Well, the
90s.
007 stage was pretty, I mean, I visited it, obviously, it's pretty
Mm.
impressive. But tank-wise, Shepperton is where we shot.
So for certain things like the tank, you would so using the two studios was purely from a sort of
We used both studios. We had a
yeah.
lot of sets and all of that stuff. So
Mm.
that big one was specifically at Shepperton. Yeah.
Yeah. And I take it this is this a few weeks to sort of do these climactic battles, because of course you've got on the wire sequence and sort
I'm
of
thinking, yeah, I think you're right.
mm,
Probably a couple of weeks.
yeah, yeah. One thing I did read, you said that Eddie Izzard had only one line in the film, and it was oh shit. It seems to be dubbed to oh fuck for the actual one in the cinema release. Was
Really?
that yeah? Well, having a little look at it today, he definitely says oh fuck, but you don't see him mouth it. It's looks like
No, I
it's a
think, yeah, no, then I don't know
dubbed in
what they
line.
did. Like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
but it's just before he lets go or,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
oh shit. Anyway,
yeah.
whatever.
It's interesting the little changes that they kind of sort of force upon you.
Yes.
Um, and I think also, I think for the UK version, I think that the knife that he pulls out to threaten her with, I think, is cut a little bit. And do you find it when you have a film that's going to be released in all different markets, different countries want different kind of cuts and are sensitive about
It's
certain things?
never been an issue with me. It's always been the cut
No.
that goes out, but I don't
Mm.
know what happens to local distributors. I mean, this one was, once I was done with it, I was done with it, and I was so upset and angry. I couldn't watch it for a long time. I don't think I can watch it anymore. It's just, it hurts because I know what the film is, and I know what it could be. I
Mm.
know the film in the film. I think Don probably said the same,
Mm.
more or less, that we know there's an amazing film in there. We've seen it.
Yeah.
So
So getting into this the troubles now. So because again you're shooting at Pinewood, you're in the UK, you're leaving Hollywood behind. They're not interfering at all with the actual, apart from maybe making a few notes here and there. But fundamentally, happy with how the shoot is going and they're not perverting it or any. So that is okay. Is Sean Connery's role a little bit expanded because when you got Connery on board, they wanted, or you said, "Oh, let's have a bigger role for him," or was it kind of always kind of that
No,
similar
no, it's always been,
size?
the script was the script. He came in, he signed on, we did it. We didn't change the roles for anyone.
Just did it as scripted sort of
Yeah.
thing. So you're putting the film together. But when it went to the test audience, how complete was it in terms of, say, the visual effects, and how far did you
Probably,
get kind of
probably rough effects, certainly
rough
rough.
effect?
No more unusual than anything else we do when we test screen.
Hmm.
But all of the Sturm and Drang at the studio happened sort of maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks of shooting.
Of shooting?
So they
Yeah.
weren't really paying attention. By the time we had finished, the dust had settled, and we were into a whole new political reality at the studio. And I was seriously worried, even before I started cutting or assembling, that it would be not a good experience, because I knew what was coming. So I kind of felt like John Voight on Runaway Train, just strapped to the front of this train, hurtling into the future, and there was nothing I could do about it except put my head down and try and do my best.
Hmm. So were you aware that they were going to preview it to an audience? Or was it?
Not to that. Well, we always preview to audiences, but
Yeah.
Jerry fought to preview it for in audiences who would understand it, whose cultural, at least let's present it to the people who would be running to see it, not to audiences to whom this is some kind of foreign language film. And anyway, that was what happened.
And so when they said they wanted some major changes, did you originally say, well, could we do some reshoots and things? And they were kind of against that idea?
They didn't want to spend any more money on it. They didn't want to make it successful.
Hmm.
Cut it down, make it fast, release it. Boom.
Yeah.
It was make it funny. It was just no. The notes were stupid.
So it was kind of just taking what comedy was in the film and perhaps sort of taking out everything else rather than, say, dubbing in too many different things. And
I can't speak for them. I know what was happening, and I'm not saying that the film would have been, a massive hit or not. Could have been, but it was. I couldn't defend it as this is what I wanted to do, and this is, people will love it or they won't, and I'll wear it. But to wear something that you don't carry is a difficult thing emotionally, because I take full responsibility. I was not powerful enough, strong enough. I didn't have enough leverage to tell the studio, no, this is my way or the highway, and you're going to release it like that. It just doesn't work that way. Certainly didn't with me. So,
well, I suppose unless you're a giant like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, you don't have that clout. 99%.
Yeah, I think, if your movie's made $1 billion, then maybe you can argue for it. But that wasn't the case.
And I think I did read that you would even recut the film for free if given
I would
an
love
opportunity.
to put out a version of that movie. In fact, like on my first movie, Christmas Vacation, also at Warner's, they waited for me. I did the 4K version earlier, this year. I came back from shooting. They had put like 40 people on this. They brought out the original negative, cleaned it, rescanned it. All the sound recording was like redone. We redubbed it. We remixed it. We recolored it, all on a big stage. Spent real money and restored the movie. I think it looks even better than when I shot it, and that was for my first movie. So I'm not beefing on Warner's. Was great to me this season, to do that. I wish they would do it for that, but I doubt if they will, because they didn't make any money on it.
Well, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? Because there is obviously a certain audience Avengers fans, because regardless of whether you like the film or not, as a fan, it is part of the Avengers canon, and therefore there's an interest
Yeah,
to potentially see it. So it's a
I
question
would
of,
say that's true. Yeah.
yeah. So it really comes down to a question of how much money you would need to do it, and kind of sort of, the anniversaries come up, don't they? The original
I
series,
guess maybe you need a very,
yeah,
very wealthy fan
yeah,
who would just go to Warner's and say, I'm going to pay to do this because they obviously own all the elements,
hmm,
and pull the elements and recut it and rescore it. And it would just be a blast to do. Be great, especially with CG being what it is now and
hmm,
polishing it up that way. And
hmm.
pipe dreams.
Well, I suppose it's always a possibility, but in terms of the film that there is, do you have any favorite scenes in the film as it stands? Moments that you mentioned, that the boot sequence being a particularly good one, and then
There's a lot of scenes that I mean, the teddy bear scenes are all my favorites because I love them so much. I love the Sean at the in the Naval Academy scene is a really, really fun one. Um, Steed in the village is a lovely thing, just walking through the village,
hmm,
bang, bang,
yeah,
bang. Um, Trubshaw's, a lot of that was cut out, but I don't know. Um, it's very, very difficult for me to think back because there's a lot of pain associated with the gestalt of the movie, and yet tenderness with the smaller, the sequences and shooting them and working with the actors. Every scene with Jim Broadbent was a blast. Every scene with Fiona Shaw was a blast. Every scene, with Eileen Atkins was a blast. So, Eddie, a blast. So,
hmm,
you know what I mean? It's a complex kind of relationship that I have with the film, and I'm sure Don feels in a different way, same kind of complex
hmm.
relationship with the film because we both had such high hopes for it.
And I think Don was saying that there was even, well, shooting. People were thinking, of course, if this is successful, we make another one, or
Yes, yeah, and everybody wanted to do that. Wasn't
hmm.
that we were resistant in any way to do that? No,
And I suppose that would have been the opportunity where you could have explored more of the characters and more. Did you have any kind of
exactly.
specific
Yeah,
hopes for? I
exactly.
suppose it's nothing you can recall that you particularly wanted to do if you got like a sequel, or
I know. I can't,
yeah.
I can't
Uh,
think of it.
well, so yeah, we've just sort of chats in between things. I want to mention that the Grace Jones song, because again that got panned a lot. Did you ever? Were you kind of around at that point when Grace Jones came in, or were you kind of
Yeah,
what?
yeah. The songs. God, I'm blanking on the music supervisor. Very, very cool. We had just a lot of really interesting artists came in and did songs. No, I could defend all the music on it. I
Hmm,
mean, all the song choices.
yeah. Did you meet Grace Jones, and did you like her if you did, or?
Oh, I had again. I knew Grace Jones
Hmm.
going back when I made commercials. We made, I think, some Diet Coke commercials or Diet
Ah,
Pepsi commercials.
yeah.
So I had known her before, and um, I was at the recording session. Yeah.
Hmm. I was just thinking about, was there ever talk of getting Brian Clemens involved with or you ever feel like you wanted to ask Brian Clemens about the project, or did you feel kind of it would be too many cooks to have kind of?
I forget. I was never in any way on defense about those guys. I love them. You know what I mean?
Hmm, yeah,
With Don, I don't remember, but we had talked about it. I don't know if I certainly wanted to meet them. I think they were on a project, and this is deep in my memory. I mean, we're talking about 1998 or something. It's like I just remember ships in the night. In other words, by the time they were out of London, in London, whatever it was, it didn't happen. But certainly big fan. You know
oh
what I
yeah,
mean? It would have been
yeah.
great.
And of course, you've got a lot of English crew. I just want to mention a couple of names: Vic Armstrong, Arthur Worcester.
Vic, yeah, new Vic,
Yeah.
also from another project. Vic, one of the great stuntmen, legendary, right?
Hmm.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
That's him
yeah,
behind the truck. That's
it
Vic.
is. Yeah.
Um,
And you got people like Terry Ackland Snow, art directors, very sort of established sort of crew. Do you think there's anything special about the kind of crews and character actors you have in the UK that perhaps might vary a little bit from Hollywood?
oh, definitely very different. Very different. English crews tend to come up through a mentoring process where you sort of work your way up, you develop certain craft excellence, then you move up like a tool and die maker. I mean, it's very, on the technical end, you just kind of move up.
Hmm.
And there is just the craftsmanship, the scenic painters. Not that there's not amazing artisans here. It's just the attitude's a little different. It's just different. Drink more
Hmm.
tea there.
Yeah, yeah. I think one people say why they like Pinewood so much is that it has a lovely restaurant and it's kind of that old classic.
Yeah.
So many classes have come out from
Yeah.
this
It's
film.
like funny. I used to have lunch with Harvey Keitel at the commissary when he was shooting Eyes Wide Shut.
Hmm.
Think about that.
Yeah.
He's not in Eyes Wide Shut.
No, no. Hmm.
I've got to,
Oh, you've got to go in a minute.
yeah.
Okay, I'll just finish. I just have a couple of last minute questions. So there was 6 years since the film, and then you going back to directing. Did you just wanted to take a break from it, or did you find there was a bit of a backlash about? Did you? What?
Well,
Yeah.
a couple things. I was just completely knifed in the chest. I was so hurt, dismayed, sad, embarrassed, humiliated, angry that I really had lost my taste for directing at all. So I
Mm,
wasn't, and I also just thought no one's ever going to hire me again anyway.
yeah.
Um, uh, I went on sort of a walkabout. When I just went all over the world. I traveled in some of the most dangerous areas of the world by myself.
Hmm.
Maybe somewhat suicidally, I don't know, but just to explore what it means to be a human being, to be away from Hollywood. You know what I mean? To cross the Gobi Desert, to spend time with just people in West Africa, just on the ground, like no Hollywood, just people of you know trying to live on $1 a day. So I went into areas all China, Africa, just everywhere,
Hmm.
just to regain my balance and
Yeah.
then come back. And I started writing. Um, and I started writing. Writing is difficult for me. Um, but once I'm in the zone, I'm good. And I got hired to write. So I wrote screenplays,
Hmm.
so that kept me going. And through slowly I regained, you know, I had turned down projects. So some projects came to me, but I didn't have that feeling.
Hmm.
And then I was offered a very, very dark movie on nuclear terror and terrorism
Yeah.
by FX network here. And they basically gave me free hand, but they gave me a very tiny budget, 21 days of shooting. And I, I decided I was just going to plunge myself in, and I was going to take an approach that I'd never taken because I'm always so insanely prepared, overly prepared, like just very meticulous, long preparation. I was really going to not prepare this movie.
Hmm.
I was going to cast it. I was going to stage it, and I was going to operate one of the cameras in it. And I was just going to shoot in the most raw, organic way, because I had no fear of failure. In other words, what are they going to do? Kick me out of Hollywood again? It turned into one of the most favorite things that I ever directed. Got 4 or 5 stars, New York Times. It was like, and it basically was the trajectory that set me into television. And so from then, the next gig was a mini series called The Bronx is Burning, which was an 8-episode. I did everything, produced and directed it. And that we got a lot of kind of nominations and awards and that kind of thing. And I love doing it. So, one thing led to another. So films, no, I did in India maybe 10 years ago, but my world has been really in writing and television.
And that's where you see yourself in the future, staying in that way.
Yeah, I like it. I probably have one more movie in me.
Do you know what you would kind of like to be, or you kind of?
I'm not going to talk about it. What?
I was just wondering if you had a concept of what that might be, or a drama, a comedy.
Well, let's put it this way: it wouldn't be a programmer. It would probably use a lot of the technologies that I've become somewhat adept at using. In terms of AI, maybe I'm a better storyteller because I'm just able to distill better, having worked in TV. And just something that we've not seen before, maybe. Stirring the pot a bit.
Oh, sounds very interesting. Well, thank you very much for sharing your memories of your career in the Avengers. It's been really wonderful to talk to you, Jeremiah.
Well, thank you, and let me know how you're doing with this and all the rest of it. So
yeah, I'll send you a copy when it's all done.
Cheerio.
Cheers. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.